Got a WFAA colleague that we're going to bring into the conversation
on the
now.
phone with us right now.
Yeah, Lorenzo and Leslie, can you hear us?
Hey, there you are.
We
Good
can
to
hear
hear from
ya.
you. Sorry that this is what we have to talk about right now, but we're primarily focusing on American Airlines. We know they are based in Dallas, which is where you are, and how they respond to these sorts of situations. What sort of insight can you give us?
Yeah, sure. American, like all major airlines, has go teams ready to go, emergency response teams that will be responding to this crash scene. I would bet departing tonight, if they're not already probably in the air. These are, members of different work groups, flight attendants, pilots, corporate folks, things like that. And the crash team is mainly going to be immediately, what's of paramount importance now are the passengers who are on there. They'll be going through the manifest, contacting the relatives of the American Airlines employees, relatives of those who were on the actual aircraft involved in this tragedy. From what we're hearing now, 60 people were on board this aircraft with 4 crew members. There'll be 2 pilots and 2 flight attendants, one usually up front in the aircraft, the other flight attendant in the back of the aircraft. A CRJ 700 is the aircraft that we're told this is, and the CRJ is Canadian regional jet. It's a very common smaller type aircraft that flies, and Reagan is one of American's main hubs ever since the U.S. Airways American Airlines merger a decade ago or so. Americans really concentrated a lot on Reagan. So in addition to American, the NTSB, obviously, as you've been mentioning, FAA, CRJ from Canada, they'll be there along with the federal government trying to figure out what happened. And as the first responders are in the Potomac trying to find survivors here, if there are any, let's hope there are. The other issue here that investigators will be looking at, I think 3 things really. Number one, was the American jet on the correct approach path and the correct altitude lined up there correctly with the runway as instructed by air traffic controllers? The second, based on the video that I've seen from the Kennedy Center, I think you guys have seen this as well, did the helicopter pilots drift in to that active approach pattern for Reagan Airport? The American jet, from the video at least, had its bright landing lights on and probably didn't see the helicopter till the last minute. But with bright landing lights on, the people on the helicopter likely should have seen something. If they were doing circles over the Potomac like the data from flight radar shows, there's usually at least one person on the helicopter who would be essentially a spotter, someone looking for other air traffic, especially in a heavily congested area like DCA is. And then the final thing I think that investigators will be looking at is the chance that air traffic controllers may have given both the helicopter and the regional jet permission to be in the same place at the same time. You guys have covered it in D.C. We've covered it in Dallas-Fort Worth. It's not unusual for these mistakes to happen. It's never led to anything like this, but I think those are the 3 issues that investigators will be looking at in the coming days. What's of paramount importance, though, right now, or whether any survivors made it through this tragedy.
Hey, Jason, as you talk about this scenario that you are able to kind of put together as you look at the video and from your vast knowledge of covering aviation, the passenger jet would not have had a whole lot of time to respond.
Yeah, that's a good point, Leslie. And approach and departure are the 2 most dangerous times because you're at a high speed and you're so close to the ground. So this aircraft was on short final, essentially. It was coming across the Potomac River, a few hundred yards away from touchdown, and there was really nothing that the pilots could do. They're slowing the aircraft down. They're bringing it down in altitude, and there's, if you veer right or left, you don't know if there's other aircraft on either side of you. It's dark outside. The ground is maybe 100, 200 feet below you. There's not a lot of room at all for error here.
And Jason, I take it this will also impact air travel, obviously for the rest of the night, across the country perhaps, and maybe even into tomorrow?
Yeah, I would say at least through the next 12 to 24 hours here, because it's an active scene there on the Potomac. And as I mentioned too, American really concentrates on Reagan, Philadelphia, Chicago, Miami, DFW and Los Angeles. But Reagan is a huge hub for American jets, not just American, but every United, Delta, everyone is coming in and out of Reagan. Dulles is going to have a lot of traffic for a while as people try to come and go from D.C. until the investigators and first responders can get this thing sorted out.
Hey, Jason, these are workhorse planes, aren't they? I mean, they go back and forth and back and forth, so these pilots would have known this airspace back and forth, left and right.
Absolutely. That's a good point. Now, the other thing to keep in mind, too, Leslie, is that the pilots on a regional jet are usually the more junior pilots. There could be some senior people who've been flying for years on there, but usually start on a regional jet and you work your way up to what's called the main line, the larger Boeing jets that you'd fly. Still, though, it's not to take away from the pilots who are flying this. They may be very experienced pilots. The other thing to think about too is the flight from Wichita. The four crew, were likely based probably in Washington, D.C. Wichita doesn't have a what's called an air base for pilots and for flight attendants there. So they're either going to be Washington, D.C. based pilots and flight attendants, or they're going to be coming in from other places like DFW, Philadelphia, or maybe Charlotte, somewhere like that. But just keep in mind, we don't hear about this very often. The American aviation system is at its safest point ever, and that's why it's so unusual for something like this to happen. But Leslie, you made a great point. If they were up 3,000 or 4,000 feet, there'd be room, and if it was daylight, you could see what's in front of you. But when it's dark, you're that low to the ground, there's really not a lot of time to do anything.
Yeah, but Jason, at the same time, you're talking about Black Hawk helicopter, those pilots who we're going to assume here are incredibly experienced. You also have the pilots for a commercial airliner. You assume they're experienced as well. You also mentioned that landing. This is one of the toughest aspects of the flight. But this area is so different because you do have this military base right across the Potomac from an airport where you're getting traffic in and out at all hours of the day.
Yeah, and that's what's surprising. As you mentioned there, Lorenzo, the experience for the military pilots there. If it was, I've heard U.S. Park Police, I've heard military. You guys probably have better information on that. But regardless, the government pilots were likely very experienced pilots. And from the data that I've been looking at from Flight Radar shows that helicopter doing circles over the Potomac. I don't know if they were looking for something, if they were training, or exactly what was going on. But when you're doing that and you're doing a circle, you're usually looking down inside the circle for something or whatever your training mission may be. You still usually have a spotter, especially in a high traffic area like that area is around DCA. You have someone looking out for other air traffic out there, especially that low with planes coming in when you're on the edge of the runway like that. That's why I think the third thing that investigators will be looking at is whether air traffic controllers may have given both the helicopter and the regional jet permission to be in the same place at the same time. They may look at that and rule that out almost immediately, but I promise you that's one of the things that they will be examining.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you, Jason. We're obviously looking at the search and rescue operation underway right now. This has been going on for nearly 2 hours. So how soon should they have some idea of what may have gone wrong?
Well, at this point, I would bet there are journalists who are going back and listening to the air traffic control recordings that are available to anybody online. So people are probably putting that together right now, trying to find out if it was a permission issue. But if it wasn't a permission issue, then you go back to asking whether the American jet was on the correct approach to that runway, the correct approach path, and the correct altitude. Was it too high? Was it too low? Was it where it was supposed to be? And if the airplane was coming in where it was supposed to be at the correct altitude, then the next question is, according to the video, did the pilots of the helicopter drift into the approach path for that regional jet? And it's too early to know whether it's any one of those three things, but one of those three things is likely going to be the cause for this.
Jason, as I'm listening to you talk tactically about all of the particulars here, who saw what, who showed what was happening leading up to this, it hits me that They're a plane full of people who actually didn't see this coming. They probably had no idea how they were in grave danger. They knew they were about to land, and then it all blew up.
Yeah, Leslie, I thought about that just before our phone call just a moment ago too. How the people on the plane, the pilots may have seen something at the last second, but nobody else on the aircraft knew anything. It was over before they knew anything. So if there is anything that's good about there wasn't any terror involved, any sheer moments of fear like that anybody had. But still, it's anytime you fly in and out of Reagan, you're banking hard to the right or the left to avoid that restricted airspace. So that's what strikes me, Lorenzo, is what you said too. Experienced pilots with a commercial company, American Airlines, experienced pilots with the U.S. government. Was it complacency? What led to this? Because this is something that just does not happen when you consider how safe our aviation system is right now.
It's a reminder of the fragility of life in so many ways,
Yeah.
that you
Sure.
get on the board a plane and you put your life in the pilot's hands, and you just assume that you will make it to your destination. No one ever thinks that what we're talking about tonight is even possible.
Yeah.
And Jason, as we're talking with you, I'm looking here, and I can see at this point that the hospital that might have received some survivors to even give some treatment to, they have not gotten anyone from this plane crash, not a soul.
That's heartbreaking to hear. When I first thought of this, even though the circumstances were different, I immediately went back to the 1980s to the Air Florida crash, which was winter weather, and it was different. But as your reporter mentioned a moment ago too, the temperature of the water, the violent collision of midair collision there, and the speeds involved, it would be probably tough to survive this. But let's hope that the hospitals see someone here soon. It's such a tragedy.
Yeah, and we know that it was a full flight. Really quickly, Jason, before we let you go, do we know why this plane would have been off of its usual path? What factors may have played a role there?
Yeah, we don't know that yet. And if a plane is off of its path, you guys know this in D.C., the FAA gets involved immediately. Sometimes the military may get involved as well. So, as you mentioned, Lorenzo, a moment ago, these pilots flying into DCA know what's involved with the approaches here. So, if they were 100 feet too high, the aircraft is going to let them know. The runway landing lights will let the pilots know that, and the air traffic controllers would alert that as well too. So there are a number of things. The pilots may be landing the plane manually.
Jason, did we lose you? It sounds like we lost him, but we thank you, Jason. He's out of WFAA, our partner station there in Dallas, Texas, which is where American Airlines is based. The center of this incident today, American Airlines Flight 5342.
Yeah, we thank him for his great expertise there. Jason, did we get you back?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. We didn't lose you. Okay, you were in the middle of a thought.
Yeah, we're having severe weather here, so I apologize. It may have been lightning here that have caused that. But when the pilots are on approach, they may be landing it manually with the yoke, with the stick of the aircraft, but they're still following the flight path and the flight trajectory that the onboard computer that they put into the onboard computer for landing at a specific runway. So there's, again, it's too early to speculate about what might have happened, but one of those three things is likely. And Lorenzo, you made a great point about the experience involved here, the uniqueness of this airport. It's not Dulles, it's not farther out. This is a highly special airport that trained people are flying into. And that's why so many questions are surrounding this. But at the end of the day, it's likely going to be a controller issue. It's likely going to be the helicopter pilots either drifting into the approach path, or the American jet may have been off the correct approach path or not on the correct altitude.
Yeah, we're showing folks at home, you're looking at FlightAware. That is the path of this flight, American Airlines 5342. And I can't help but keep thinking about what Jason mentioned a little earlier, the folks with American Airlines who have to respond to these sorts of disasters and identifying the folks who may have been on this plane and also trying to get in touch with their loved ones as well.
Passenger manifest, all of those things that we just...
These people.
That's right. We take all of this for granted. Jason, we thank you for your time tonight and for your expertise and for your humanity as we are talking about the impact on so many lives here, just the clarity that you were able to provide and reminding us in a lot of ways that this flight crew was likely based here in D.C.
Yeah.
They were heading home.
Yeah.
They were heading home. Jason, you all...
Thank you, guys, and good luck.
All right, my friend. Take good care there, and you be safe in that severe weather that you all are enduring.
Yeah, let us know if you hear anything else
All right,
new.
thank you.